Welcome back. We start part 2 where we left off in part 1 with a Foster Yeoman train, but this time it's hauled by one of the new Class 59s. While the locomotives were designated by BR as Class 59 and manned by BR staff, they were owned and maintained by Foster Yeoman, the first major company to run private locomotives on BR track. The 59s proved both reliable and successful, and in 1990 quarry company ARC and National Power in 1994 bought Class 59s to haul their own trains. So despite the 56s feeling really new to me, they were soon replaced by Class 59s. Altogether less dramatic, it must be said. Representing this situation we have Hornby Class 59004 on a Foster Yeoman train. The model comes from the railroad range but has proved smooth and capable just like the real thing. It has buffer beam detail and full cab detail. In April 1998 National Power Rail operations were taken over by English, Welsh and Scottish Railway EWS. So we now arrive at freight sectorisation between 1987 and 1994. In 1987 BR's freight operations were restructured into sectors according to the type of train operation and material carried. I recall various internal films at the time saying how amazing everything would be. Trainload Freight Division was organised into various subsectors to handle trainload block train operations. Rail Freight Distribution Division handled intermodal and non-block train work. Here, Lima 31327, looking very attractive in its red striped livery, finds itself on a train of pallet vans full of fertiliser and other agricultural bagged goods. The reason for the breakdown will become apparent soon. 31327, having reached part way to its destination, needs to propel its train for a short distance to the receiving yard. As there is no run-round facility, the need for the brake van becomes clear, with the guard keeping lookout and in radio contact with the locomotive. This sequence was inspired by Railfreight Today, Volume 5 South East by Telerail, where the same operations were filmed. Once the train reaches the yard, the 31 will be required to split and position the train ready for unloading. While this takes place, the loco will need to wait, so time for tea, before proceeding to the next station, running round its train and then heading back to the train's origin. Rail Express operation handled parcels traffic, but this is not something I have any models of. Any operations not assigned to either train load freight or rail freight distribution were handled under the Rail Freight General branding, although its limited responsibilities were later taken over by Rail Freight Distribution. The sectors were given distinctive individual branding. Train Load Freight, TLF, was formed in October 1987 and continued until BR privatisation in 1996, albeit reorganised again in 1994. At the outset, 1988, the company was authorised to acquire 100 Class 60 locomotives. The TLF division was divided into separately branded subsectors to serve high-volume customers. These were coal, construction, metals and petroleum. Each subsector locomotive was given a coloured identification logo. Where a subsector had insufficient resources available, it was often practiced to borrow available assets from another sector. Coal subsector. The coal subsector logo was made up of a yellow square containing 4 black diamonds. Coal subsector included merry-go-round, block coal train movements for power stations and provided resources for steel and cement works, as well as fly ash and nuclear flask trains. Here Lima 31275, looking smart in its coal sector livery, is found on an MGR train, also carrying coal sector branding. It would be more usual to find pairs of 31s on MGR trains, or a single locomotive on the nuclear flask trains. Something of a special for me now, we have 56075, branded as mainline, although probably depot, on a long MGR train. She arrived with me in Christmas 1987 as a direct result of seeing Class 56s at work on the festive Fisherman Rail tour to Cleethorpes from London, and in working yard whilst I was on pilot duty with an 09 shunter. Here are 2 relevant photos. Despite her age, she still puts in a good performance, but is getting a little noisy now. construction subsector included aggregates, self-discharge trains, cement, lime, gypsum trains, refuse and channel tunnel materials. The construction logo contained alternate small blue and yellow squares. Now the first of our Class 60s comes into view with Lima 60039, hauling a mixed cement train. The Class 60s promised to be the most powerful and advanced locomotives on British Rail's network. Sadly, they were dogged by technical faults for many years. The train has so-called V cement tanks and 2 rail liner vans loaded with bag cement from the same supplier. While sharing a common ancestry, the motors in the Lima Class 60s are quite sophisticated, including back EMF compensation and inductance to help with noise suppression. The metals subsector serviced iron ore, slab, semi-finished products, wire coil, scrap metal, aluminium and limestone. The metals logo contained alternate blue and yellow chevrons. Some of you may have already spotted the locomotive for our next train as the cement train passed the yard. A new locomotive to Model Railways Unlimited is 37051 in metal sector livery. Quite rightly, she's pulling a train of finished steel products and scrap. This fine loco was purchased in order to make this video, as I found I had nothing representing the metal sector. She will undergo marker light fitting soon and will appear in a video of her own then. Once out of the yard, the loco will run around its train and head off in the opposite direction. A chance to compare the construction and metals logos as a cement train passes by the Class 37. The metal loads seen come from painted drinking straws, salvaged TV aerial parts and stone cast loads. The loco, costing just £45 brand new and unused, shows the fantastic value that Lima brand continues to provide for us in the face of some very offensive prices these days. The petroleum subsector, including oil, petroleum, chemicals, bitumen, LPG, aviation fuel and locomotive fuel operations. The logo was made up of square alternate blue and yellow waves. Another of our Class 60s, this time Lima 60003, rumbles into shot with a long petrochemical train of tank wagons as befitting her branding. These Lima 60s are remarkably strong. Rail freight distribution. There is just time in this video to touch on one of the most diverse sectors, that being rail freight distribution. Representing the distribution branding, Lima 47306 is entrusted with an important flow of ferry vans. The Loco was something of a local celebrity for many years here in the south and was named the Zapper. Rail freight distribution, RFD, was created by the division of BR's earlier rail freight sector. RFD was responsible for non-train load freight operations, as well as freightliner and intermodal services. In its early years, the division was occasionally referred to as Speedlink Distribution. RFD was responsible for freight operations through the Channel Tunnel. RFD employed two-tone grey livery similar to those adopted by Trainload Freight and Rail Freight General subsectors in 1992. In the third and final part of this series, we will revisit RFD before delving into other freight operations of the time and seeing more of the ever-popular Rail Freight Red Stripe livery. See you there!